And
This
I got
conference will
limited.
now be recorded.
I'm sorry, who's on the phone?
Jeff Donlevy on the phone. I have limited battery power. I'll sign on to video once we get into
Discussions.
food grade
That's fine.
packaging. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, commissioners. It's, believe it or not, our 35th meeting of the Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling. Here, February 2nd. I can't believe we're in February already. So we'll first start with the roll call. Commissioner Bouchard, are you on? Don't see him. Okay. See Commissioner Cadena is on. And we have Commissioner Davis on. Commissioner Dell is here. Commissioner Donlevy's on the phone. Commissioner Ferrante is here. Cal Bakoff.
I'm on the phone. I'm on.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Lapis.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Medrano.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. And Commissioner Osagura, I see you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Myself, Commissioner Schneider. Are you on? Okay, I think we're missing Commissioner Schneider. Commissioner Sky, I think I saw. Good morning.
Good morning.
Commissioner Toyota, I saw in her gear for going out and working a facility. Good morning, Commissioner and Vice Chair Valle. Is he on? Okay, I don't see him at this point. And Commissioner Ward, I see. So we've got three missing.
And Commissioner Bouchard is here.
Oh, great. Welcome, Commissioner Bouchard. All right, so we're missing two, Commissioner Schneider and Valle, and hopefully we can get them online soon. If anybody has their text number, might want to remind them and see if they're having any trouble. So we've established a quorum, and we will now move on to agenda item number 2, which is the review and potential approval of meeting notes. Has everybody hopefully had a chance to review those? And does anybody want to make a motion or offer any edits to the meeting notes? And I see Vice Chair Valle has arrived. Welcome.
Heidi, I have a question. The notes indicated the food grade committee was Commissioner Schneider and Dell, and when the report came back, it had you and Commissioner Dell as the authors. Were the minutes in error?
I had actually tried to take my name off because really Commissioner Dell did 99% of the work on that. So because that's open and I really can't be on everything. So that was
I didn't know if the minutes were wrong, so that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, so actually the minutes I think are wrong. Commissioner Dell, what do you think were the meeting minutes? Let me go back and look at them real quick.
I think we got confused on these 2-person committee things again, and people volunteering and unvolunteering, and so on, as we have before. So is Commissioner Schneider on? If she agrees to be on this 2-person committee, then that's great on a go forward basis for other things we can examine. But it wasn't clear to me on the last call that was set in stone, or that was a requirement for introducing policies.
It's not. Anybody can introduce a commissioner, any commissioner can introduce a policy.
I believe Commissioner Schneider does want to work on this, but we need to have her on when she does come on to commit, and then yeah, we can be the 2-person committee, and that'd be great moving forward.
Okay, now we're on these, I'm looking at the meeting notes right now. Commission structure and management. That was a different discussion, I think. So that was under. Yeah, I see.
Yeah. Agenda item 8 on page 9.
Yep. So
yeah, page 9, item 7.
The next full commission meeting. Okay, the thermoform policy proposal will be discussed at the next meeting. That we've got that, and additional agenda item to be dedicated to issues with recycled food grade plastics, Commissioner Schneider and Dell. I don't recall it being Schneider actually, myself. I could go back and check the meeting.
As I'm tracking the 2-person committees, I try to make sure I get good notes on that. And I did have Commissioner Schneider as
oh, you did? Okay.
Being on that.
Let's just leave it, because the truth is we can change it unless somebody thinks this was really wrong and we didn't do that.
It looks like Ann Schneider's in the chat.
Oh, good. Does she recall being on the two-person committee so we can approve the notes, or should we take her off? Can she not hear us?
She
All I can
is.
see is that she put an
Hi.
asterisk.
Yes,
she is.
I did agree to be part of the two-person committee.
Oh, good. Okay, then the meeting minutes are accurate. So is there anybody else that has edits on the meeting minutes? Okay, then we'll go ahead and approve, or take a
Move to
motion
approve.
in a second.
I'll second.
Great, thank you. All commissioners okay with the meeting minutes as written? Very good. Is there anybody opposed or has any other changes? Fantastic, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll now move on from agenda item number 2 to number 3, which is the public comment review for items not on the agenda. So CalRecycle, do we have any public comments?
This is Jeffrey James with CalRecycle. At this time, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I don't think we've met, so we've got a new staffer. Thanks for your help.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very good. So we'll go ahead and move on from agenda item 3, zooming along to agenda item 4, which is the commission structure and management. And this is where we were going to discuss the structure and management, including the charter, which was head up by Vice Chair Valle. So Vice Chair Valle, did you want to speak
Sure,
about
yeah.
the charter?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that our charge is in keeping with what we discussed. So we had a very brief conversation, Commissioner Oseguera and I, but I did go through the minutes, and as I highlight these points, and these are right from the minutes, these are the things that we're going to explore. Obviously, we haven't had time to do that, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. And so if I could, I want to go through these points, about 5 of them. Good?
Yes, please.
Okay. Commissioner Lapis noted that the commission should develop a strategy to deal with commissioners stepping down or reapplying. That was number 1. Number 2, Policy Director Zoe Heller recommended that the commission refer to statute, which outlines authority for the commission and CalRecycle. She also recommended that the commission review their charter. That's item 2. 3, Chair Sanborn proposed a 2-person committee to review the charter and some of the issues raised here. 4, Commissioner Sky agreed that Chair Sanborn has been incredible. Oh, sorry, that was, you are incredible. Sorry, that's out of context. There should be a process to discuss if individuals are in good standing should decide to leave the commission, and addressing those vacancies. There should be no reason a commissioner is in good standing should be removed from the commission. So that's another item that we're going to look at in the charter. And we talked about in the future some form of hybrid commission to accommodate transparency and participation going forward. That's another item. Commissioner Davis commented that under Bagley-Keene, which differs from the Brown Act, he wants to address a limit of 2-person communication in serial meetings and not be able to talk to experts outside the commission meetings. It is challenging for policy making. That's another item we're going to look at. Commissioner Ward echoed Commissioner Davis's comment. He also said that the amount of time focused on the bottle bills, take that out. Chair Sanborn made a data request for the recycle to CalRecycle's legal authority to appoint or remove commissioners. So we need a response on that. And then Chair Sanborn said it is time to revisit the charter before the end of June. Vice Chair Valle will lead this effort, and Commissioner Oseguera agreed to work on that with the Vice Chair. Vice Chair Valle requested that we should consider filling the vacancy on the commission as a discussion on the charter. Chair Sanborn noted that there is no set number of commissioners in statute. And And I think that's about where we left it. Have I left anything out that people would like us to look at in terms of looking at the charter?
Sounded very comprehensive to me. Did anybody else have something they wanted discussed?
No, that sounds good. The one thing I would add is on the Bagley-Keene, as this is an advisory group, the question is whether or not that still applies, because the Bagley-Keene is often made for folks who are actually setting policy or legislation. Doing neither. We're recommending.
That's a brilliant point coming from a brilliant mind, because you're right. Exactly right. We're advisory. So where are the fences and where are the lines that Bagley-Keene would even apply to us, to be honest? That's a good point.
I mean, we've actually questioned this from the beginning. We've all thought this was a little odd, but we don't have a lawyer. We're just looking to CalRecycle's lawyers for advice. And so I think I was gonna reach out to now that I think about it, Susan Eggman's office to ask them to get this clarified through Ledge Council, right? Now that I think about it, I've had a very busy couple of weeks. So I will definitely go back and do that.
So Madam Chair, that's our report for the moment.
So that's a lot. And some of it, hopefully we can get answered today, or at least know when CalRecycle can respond to the data request, because I think that would be very helpful to know what their read of the law is and our authority, who's appointing and who's removing members, et cetera. I think we have a few comments and thoughts. Commissioner, Schneider, I think we had you on the last item. So it's Commissioners Dell, Sky, Schneider, and then Lapis.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Valle. I'd like to request that we bring back up again in the next meeting, the financial conflict of interest rules that we set, or guidelines that we set around the commission. CalRecycle is advising us that that it's up to the commission to police itself around financial conflicts of interest. And I think I'm very concerned about the credibility of the commission. It's becoming obvious that our commission is powerful. We're having an impact. We're influencing laws. We're suggesting policies that are actually getting, passed and put into laws, and then that makes us susceptible to outside influences who may like to try to pay for influence. And I'm very concerned that we all, that we're careful on this, and that there's strict guidelines, and we all agree what those are, so that there isn't financial influence, and that the correct credibility of the commission can be maintained. Thank you.
Commissioner Valle, so that you'll add that to the list, just revisiting the.
Yes, I made a note. It's on the agenda. We'll look at it.
Thank you. Commissioner Sky?
Thank you. I had just a minor point, which is when I was preparing for the agenda, I was not able to find the current version of the charter on the website. I recall it used to be posted, and I had downloaded a 2020 version, but I thought there might be a more up-to-date version. So let's just make sure that we do have that as part of the documents, either on the main commission website or the Google site. And then related to Commissioner Dell's comments, I know many of us, if not the majority of us, are already required to file Form 700 financial interest forms. And I'm happy to provide a copy of that and even post it on the Commission's website, just to provide an additional level of transparency for our constituents.
Thank you. Jeffrey from CalRecycle, can you confirm that you heard that comment about adding that to the website? I had commented, I think, a year ago on that, and I was hoping that charter, it shouldn't be secret, it should be very public what our charter is, so that there's nothing people are worried about. And we all know exactly what the document is, and we are all following it. So can we get that posted, please?
Hi, Heidi. This is Laura Moreno. With the charter, it is still hosted by CalRecycle, but was removed since it is a commission document. So I can check in with the team and get back to you on that.
Okay, and then why don't you just go ahead then and email me the version that you have and I'll confirm it with mine, and then we'll just put it in our Google documents since I want it public as quickly as possible. It shouldn't be a secret. Thank
can
you.
send that to you.
I'd prefer it be on your page as well because it is, you appointed us, but
Madam Chair, if I could ask a request on behalf of Commissioner Oseguera and myself, could you email us that version so that we can start working on it right away, please?
absolutely. So Lori, you'll just go ahead and send me what you've got. I'll confirm it's what I have, and then I'll forward that on to, I'll put it on the Google Doc, and then we'll forward it on to the vice chair and the rest of the commission, so they've all got it. Thank you. All right, so next is Commissioner Schneider.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of Form 700s, the annual due date is April 1st for all of us who automatically or are required to do them. Change of subject, I was on a District 4 Caltrans Bicycle Advisory Committee plus Pedestrian Advisory Committee. They're both state advisory committees, and they do not have to use Bagley-Keene. It was a discussion point last week. If you like, I can reach out to the staff and figure out why they aren't, but we are doing, in some ways, similar advisory, this is what we think should happen here in the Bay Area type work. But it was great to hear that they don't have to comply with Bagley-Keene.
Thank you. Yeah, whatever you can share that might be comparable might be very useful to all of us.
Will
And
do.
I would say that Form 7 for the 700s, elected officials and people in government usually file those. You know, as a nonprofit, I have to file 990s and, you know, tax documents. So it's all there for us. Different nonprofits have to file different forms with different levels of detail. But there's really, I don't think, a whole lot of secrets by any of us about where we're getting money. And if there is, we should all be, I think we agreed that we would be public about if there was something that's a conflict. You know, we've talked before about how all of us, we're so interconnected in so many ways that it's very, very difficult to tease all this out. You know, I was going to say today on the thermoforms issue, Green PET is one of my members. That doesn't mean, you know, anything except I'm transparent. I'm not hiding that. And I don't think and I report that. So, but if everybody, when we're talking about something, if anybody's worried about those kinds of conflicts, then we should absolutely make it public but we are just advisory. We're not setting law. Okay, Commissioner Lapis.
I just want to follow up on the legal request we're going to make to Eggman's office. I want to make sure we include the question of can we meet in more than two groups of more than two people as long as it's not a majority. I think that was the main thing where we weren't sure that we agreed with the advice we were given. And then as far as Bagley-Keene, I mean, I know that CalRecycle's interpretation is pretty much in line with Cal EPA's interpretation for other advisory committees. I think this might be my third advisory committee that is subject to Bagley-Keene. And I actually think this even came up in the, I want to say mattress or carpet advisory committee as well. And I think they ended up with the same decision. So that seems fairly consistent, but the meetings of no more than two people seem inconsistent, I believe. So that's the point I'd love clarification on. And then as far as the conflicts of interest, you know, I'm sort of two minds on this. On one hand, I completely understand the point, and I think we can disclose what our conflicts are. On the other hand, the folks representing private businesses are here representing private businesses. They're not here as individuals. They're getting paid by their companies to represent their businesses' perspectives. And I don't think that's a conflict. I think that was, you know, intentionally written into the law. So it's just more transparency is always better, but you know, almost by definition, anybody working for a recycling business gets paid to recycle or, you know, to support recycling or, yeah. So I kind of struggle with that a little bit.
Yeah, I do too, because it's very, all of us are so intertwined in different ways. So, and again, we're just advisory. I mean, we can't write law, although we are powerful, and that's because of the way we've worked together. We still don't write the laws as a group, and we don't even lobby the laws as a group. We've decided that, and I think that was a good call too. Commission, I guess public comment we have, Jeffrey. Do you want to read that?
Yes, from Doug Cobold with the California Product Stewardship Council. CPSC would like to suggest that if the commission is found to be not obligated to comply with Bagley-Keene, then this be evaluated for the product stewardship program advisory committees. Currently, these would be carpet and mattresses.
Okay. And Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, while you were discussing Bagley-Keene, I opened it up, and the very first paragraph, 11-121A, says every state, board, or commission or similar multi-member body of the state that is created by statute or required by law to conduct official meetings, and every commission created by executive order. Those are the state bodies who are covered by Bagley-Keene. But I think because we're created by statute, as opposed to maybe a Caltrans advisory committee that's not statutory, that would be the difference. But we can get an opinion, but to me, it's pretty clear.
Well, there you go. It says if it was from statute, then it sounds like that it applies.
Commission
Okay.
created by statute couldn't be more explicit.
Well, John, if you look a little bit deeper, I think that what we can do is ask the senator's office to see if there are amendments that can be made, and I'm sure there are exceptions. I think I heard earlier that was an exception of another advisory board or commission at the state level where Bagley-Keene did not apply.
Yeah, there are some carve-outs. So,
and I think we can work that into the prospect of changing our charter or simply insert something.
Thank you. And Commissioner Sky?
Just briefly, I want to reinforce what Commissioner Lapis mentioned. I don't think the problem is Bagley-Keene. I think it's this unique interpretation that really hampers the work, especially at the two-person committees when we're meeting with each other, and then we have to separately discuss items with stakeholders that are trying to provide us feedback, and we're fully transparent about the way we do the work and report to the full commission about the results of those discussions. But it just really slows down the work that we're doing. And I say that from personal experience with the work I'm trying to do right now with Commissioner Osigura.
Yep. And I would just say, because this was set up without funding, that means that our employers are funding our time, which does mean I think there could be more potential influence by our funders that fund us. But I think that was also the way it was designed, because we're reflecting who we work for is why we were appointed, I believe, to this commission. So, but there shouldn't be secrets either. So, okay, very good. Are there any other comments? It sounds like we've got a nice long list for Vice Chair Valle and Commissioner Osigura to work on here. I will work with the Vice Chair on the email to Senator Eggman's office to make sure we get that request in. And I apologize if I didn't get it in earlier. I've been really, really busy. And then
there's two more dots.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Dell and then Osigura.
Just for the record, I think the charter says that we're all supposed to be working for the state of California, and Californians first, not for the interests that we represent. So I think that should actually be the priority. And then secondly, we've actually said to industry, sorry, you can't join. This is supposed to be a cross-section of NGOs, recycling industry, state officials, and we've specifically said to industry, no, you can't join. And so now to say that we have groups that might be representing those industries indirectly, I think, calls into question, where do the priorities lie? And so I'd like to believe everybody would raise their hand and say, we're all doing this to help the state of California meet those 4 goals for Californians, for the health of our economy, our environment, our people first, right? And then after that, you bring in your own self-interest, who you work for, but those can't come first. Can we all raise our hands and agree with that?
I do. Yep. And I think we've all done that. I think we've tried really hard to do that. So I don't really, maybe I wasn't clear, but yeah, that's absolutely right. Commissioner Segura?
I just want to try to clarify something. I mean, we are on this board also because of the expertise we bring for the companies that we work for, or the organizations that we work for. I know many times someone has asked, hey, what are recycling facilities doing regarding this? So I go and ask a question of a recycling facility, or go visit it and see what they're doing. And so we just have to be careful that things that are very proper and that we are getting insights aren't, turn into a conflict, right? The purpose that we are here is to do that. If we have how a county is effective, or what's happening at a county level in decision making, I love to hear from Kobe Skype. Why? Because he's dealing with many issues of what's impacting a county. If it's something's happening regarding Commissioner Valle and his enterprise, but also a nonprofit running a recycling program, how is that being effective? And I think we can't lose sight that that is valuable versus, I can't imagine that we can all say we do not have ideas and we don't interact with others within the organizations that we work for. I just want to make sure that we're very clear that, conflict is, to me, we'll look into it, but conflict can't be that when we go and have a conversation internally in our organizations about what we're doing and bring back those best practices or the issues or the concerns. So I just wanted to make sure to say that.
Thank you. Okay, so when we do get to these, commission structure management, they, can take some time. So I thank very much the Vice Chair and Commissioner Oseguera for taking this on and helping us work through this and making sure we're all on the same page again. It's probably good at 18 months to do a refresh and a reminder. Are there any other comments or questions on this part of the agenda? So we'll just leave this item on the upcoming agendas so you can give us a report out, Vice Chair Valle and Commissioner Oseguera, and then I'll work with you on the email to the Senator requesting some feedback. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 5, which is food grade packaging policy discussion. And this has been brought up at several meetings. And we are going to discuss the issues related to the use of recycled content for food grade packaging and other food grade packaging issues. And I think Commissioner Ward, if you could pull up the policy proposal so we can all look at it together. And Commissioner Dell, you've done the hard work on this one, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. So this was introduced being brought on the agenda in the last meeting. And so this is the first discussion. And to be clear, Commissioner Sanborn does not want her name on this. So you can go ahead and take that off. Commissioner Schneider can decide later if she wants to have her name on it. This is the first reading, and there's no rush to this process. This is a very critical issue, in my opinion, to safeguard Californians, consumers, and it's a complex topic because we're talking about toxics. We're talking about something invisible, right? Mostly invisible, and it's not something that's been on the agenda or discussed much. And so this is the introduction of a policy to safeguard Californians. I will tell you that this is now being discussed across the country in other states and in other countries as well. But I'm introducing it today to start the discussion. We don't have to rush this to a vote and to the next vote and so on. We can have an open discussion on it. We can find more research. We, can take our time to investigate it. But as I sent out the email, which was also published in the public domain, there was more research, a growing pile of credible, third-party reviewed, peer-reviewed research coming out that plastics are not inert like metal and glass, and actually pose a high toxic risk. We're talking about recycling them back into food grade, specifically plastic. In the email that I sent out, and I took a couple of examples here. I didn't want to put too many in as a background to scare everybody, but research from Europe, research from Canada, samples, 24 samples that were taken of HDPE around the world all show toxins. That there's a growing pile of evidence. And unfortunately, we're in the situation again where the FDA oversight is lagging. And they fully admit that if you go on their website, right? It's totally testing, quality testing is on the company honor system right now. And we've seen what's happened with that in the past. And so looking at this body of evidence and the history of toxins getting into the environment, impacting people, and then causing these problems like we've got with PFAS now, where we have to go and get them out of the environment. I believe that it is wise, it is the ethical step to now hit the precautionary principle button and say, based on this evidence, food grade packaging with recycled plastic should only be sourced from secure closed systems. And that's what the literature says, all of it over and over again. Because just to give you the three quick toxic pathways, there's 3 pathways that can happen. Again, we all understand plastics are different. If you have a Tupperware and you put, or a plastic, I don't want to use a brand name, you have a plastic container, if you put red tomato sauce in it, you try to empty it out and try to wash it out, it's still red. Why? It absorbs other organics. You do that with a glass or metal container, it doesn't happen. So plastics is a different animal. All right, okay, there's 3 pathways that toxics can be recycled, and to a level, especially in food grade, that can cause human harm. That is proven. And the biggest risks, the biggest 2 pathway risks come in the curbside bin. We all know curbside bins are literally trash bins now. Consumers put anything and everything into them. I will show you Exhibit A of what I bought on Home Depot shelf, right? Malathion in an HDPE container. This would be optically scanned with an PET container, optically scanned with a PET bottle. This is not food grade. It actually has, it's got a toxic product in it. If a consumer puts this in their bin, it actually also impacts everything else that's in the bin. If you think about a good PET bottle, if it's gone in that bin, it's now slept with this. It's changed. Again, unlike glass and metal, this remembers what it sleeps with. So you can take it out of the toxic bin, but you can't be assured that you've taken the toxics out of what's in there. So the 2 toxic pathways in curbside bins in particular cannot be ignored. And they are, number 1, the fact that you've got non-food grade materials like this one, or PVC thermoform sold at, I want to be clear, Ace Hardware, not Home Depot. In the last meeting I said Home Depot, it's actually Ace Hardware. Looks like PET, doesn't it, right? So this could get mixed in with PET. Optical scanners aren't perfect. Human scanners aren't perfect. Easily get mixed in at 0.05%. You've got toxic level problems in a PET bale. Or you've got this where people are putting liquids in. So this gets to the conclusion that if you put it in a curbside bin, it is got the high potential, whatever the plastic is, for containing a toxic. And so what I'm proposing in this is actually that in California, we create a policy that says food grade plastics. You know, this is not for carpet or for pipe or all the other downcycling that can happen with plastics. For food grade, it has to come from a secure source, what's called a closed collection system. By doing that, you minimize the potential contaminants down to just what's in these bottles themselves. Now, it's not perfect. If you read the CENA report, even they say there's still some bad labels. So there's a separate policy proposal that Commissioner Dunleavy and I are submitting, saying, okay, for PET bottles that go into deposit systems, let's prohibit all the PVC labels and everything that can actually contaminate this. So taken together, these two policies, one, are going to protect Californians from the toxins and curbsides, and then the other one will work to clean up the PET bottles as much as possible. I think it's really important for us to think about the sources of where we're going to get this recycled plastic from that we're all hoping to have in these recycled content mandates. Here's the reality. There's about 10 PET bottle processors in California today. No new ones have been announced in the last couple of years. These 10, they're working hard. They're trying to make a profit. They're trying to process this stuff back into food grade, and they have limited capacity. Okay, so that capacity is already being purchased. When we go and talk about adding more mandates in, it's going to be imports. It is not going to come from California. It's not going to come from Arizona. The closest PET processor from California East is in Dallas, and they've got their own market. So when we're talking about how we're going to get that recycled content mandate just for the existing PET bottles, let alone anything else, this means it's going to come from Mexico, China, somewhere else. We hear it often from PET, from plastic processors. They do not want to build in California. Oh, it's terrible, not a good place, no water, and so on, right? So we have to have the real due diligence to say, where actually is this recycled content going to come from, and is it safe? And so that's my preamble to this, and we can go into what this goes. This is just very straightforward, laying out food grade plastics, which would help use our own deposit systems. And I want to point out a big flaw in the bag law in California. It doesn't say where the recycled content has to come from. So right now, all the CVS bags sold in California are imported from Germany. We are actually importing Germany's recycled content. We're not using our own plastic bag waste. Same with Aldi. Same with Target is buying some from France. I guess that's why they call it Target. And Pavilions is buying from Singapore, I think, as well. And so we really have to stop and think about these recycled content mandates, where the plastic will come from. Is it safe? Press the pause button on the precautionary principle, and protect Californians first. So that, I'll just open it up to comments. And then this policy we can step through bigger and bigger, but this is the bigger picture question, I think.
I have a question, and then I think it's Commissioner Ward, but if we're getting back to the precautionary principle, I'm really glad you brought that up, because the more I look at this too, the more concerned I am that we've got chasing arrows and recycling stuff on really toxic containers containing clearly hazardous chemicals. Could a policy, I'm just throwing it out there for a brainstorming, but could a policy be that we recommend that all hazardous products that are dangerous and should not end up in a recycling stream be like a black recycled plastic, or of a certain recycled content, or some way that everybody could very clearly identify that's not supposed to go into any sort of recycling system, and be also, maybe it's downcycling because it would end up probably being burned or buried, but at least it wouldn't get contamination into the food grade. Just a thought. I'm trying to kind of.
I think this is very valid. I mean, I think we should brainstorm multiple policy solutions. I would vote for bright red as opposed to black if we were going to do that. But we also have to have the recognition that curbside bins are essentially trash bins. I watch what's in my neighbor's bins. There's actually dirty MRFs here too, you know, in the state, right? And when you're talking about contaminations levels of 0.005%, you know, and this much, you know, ruining a whole truckload of PET bales, right? I don't see how you ever could raise your hand and take the liability that curbside bins are clean enough to eat off of, basically. But I think your point, I'd like to suggest that we capture that as one idea to take forward to at least help clean up so that the carpet at least doesn't get malathion, or Roundup. Roundup is also, well, I never go down this aisle, but we bought this stuff, right? So Roundup is in a white PET. Here's one that's really scary. This cooktop stuff has allyl heptanoate, which, you look it up, is an acute toxin. It says acutely toxic, and it actually has a please recycle symbol on it. So that the How to Recycle people are telling consumers, go ahead, yeah, throw this in your recycle bin, right? That's super scary. But yeah, I agree. I mean, what are other ideas that people have?
I think Commissioner Ward and then Valle.
Yeah, I really appreciate Commissioner Dell's work on this, and I think it's a great general thrust to try to make sure that, to the extent packaging is used, it's not contaminating our food, and we have our recycling systems that work. I'm much more excited about the PVC prevention in PET. I think this needs more refining. One of my concerns is that it's pretty easy to say, let's have another separation. But in terms of practicality and how those collection systems work, I'm not exactly sure how that would work in practice, though I agree with the general thrust. My concern is that we've heard it from more than one angle, in which they're asking for additional separations at curbside, and certainly there is a limit.
Right, yeah, to be clear, the closed collection definition would actually be separate, such that if an item went in a curbside bin, then it's potentially contaminated. So it literally would have to be like through the deposit system or another system that was secure, such that the item was never put into the curbside bin. And the FDA does require, but it's all on the honor system, which is that if you look at the FDA notice list of approvals or non-objections, it all says food grade sources only, which is actually the huge problem for companies who get a letter. They actually can't get food grade only, because once it goes into a curbside bin, it's mixed up with non-food grade.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Valle, and then Schneider, Sky, Davis, Toyota, and then I know we've got Commissioner Dunleavy and Lapis. So in that order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, we have at this very moment 4 people walking neighborhoods tagging carts, because by contract our company is required to clean up the recycling stream, which is highly contaminated coming into our facility. We're at about 40% garbage in terms of what we bring in. The easy part about doing the tagging is when you see raw garbage, flies, food, yesterday a suitcase, and other things in a cart, we can give them a red tag, which means our trucks will not pick up that cart. We had great success so far in these neighborhoods, because by the time you get tagged a 3rd time, you run out of room in your cart, and people stop doing it, and they do change behavior. In fact, yesterday we had somebody say to their neighbor on their cart, please do not put garbage in my cart. I want to pass the test from the recycling company. Or no, I want to pass the inspection. That was very encouraging. That was done by the resident themselves. Commissioner Dell's proposition that we go one step further into food and into the food stream and look at these different products that are created for packaging that affect our bodies and our way of life is a great direction. I really appreciate your bringing this forward because now, for the most part, if our taggers in the community go out and they see plastic containers in the cart, you can't check every single plastic container, but if they see them, the assumption is, okay, we'll take it. Not knowing that these could have toxic outcomes to people and human beings. So I don't see any other commission that does what we do in terms of the waste stream, looking at these products and examining them very closely to see if they're harmful to human health. So even though we're called the Recycling Commission and not health and not people's well-being, we still have an obligation in terms of our field of work to hold people accountable who are creating products that are harmful to you and me, our children, our grandchildren. So I really admire the work of Commissioner Dell that you're doing in this. I'm looking forward to the outcomes. And if Commissioner Snyder doesn't want to work with you, I definitely want to do this. Thank you.
Fantastic. Commissioner Schneider, I think you're next, and then Sky.
Thank you. I'm happy to continue work on it, but also happy to have a third person on it. I'm trying to think of how we educate the public on this. And given that I have that cooktop cleaner, all of us with induction cooktops are told to use that particular product. So now I'm feeling terrible, but it sounds to me like the container itself, once it's got malathion in it, should probably be put into the household hazardous waste stream. Sorry, HHW people, because that's a very expensive collection system. Jan, that's something we can talk about. I think the work that Jan has done so far with the toxicity of what we're putting into our lives branches out into other things. Jan and I have been talking about if we substitute takeout food packaging, what is really good food packaging that really is healthy, and there is at least one manufacturer that seems to have passed through that, and that will get to you as soon as I can get to writing it. But it also has a big implication on the artificial turf. Artificial turf is releasing all kinds of toxins into our environment, often right next to where someone might be growing tomatoes so that they can have a healthy homegrown source. So I think this is very exciting that this is our pushback on better living through chemistry. You know, we as humans have got to be smarter in our plastics. The only other thing that I'm trying to think where it fits in the labeling, it's probably going to have to say, do not put in your curbside program, just to clean up the curbside stream. That's a labeling issue, but it's the existing microwave food, which is typically number 7, occasionally polypropylene, and sometimes other stuff that you can't identify. That's not part of this, Jan, but it begs the question that, are we going to dive into everything that's getting microwaved, which is going to release all the more toxins into our bodies? So just my comments. But thank you, Jan. Good work.
Thank you. Commissioner Sky, Davis, Toyota, and then Dunleavy.
I think this is great work. I was going to mention this is very much aligned with the precautionary principle that the commission put forward. The question I had was regarding how you define a closed recycling system. I think that should be spelled out more in the proposal. The CRV system, I don't know that it really would meet that definition because it's getting material from curbside sources as well as from take back. And as we know, the take back centers are suffering greatly. So there's a lot less material coming through what would truly be a closed system now. So hopefully this proposal could help align with that. And I do think we want to highlight the fact that more closed collection systems really do provide much cleaner feedstock. And we've talked about this on other items. It's a way to actually improve the recyclability of products and boost our recycling.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Davis, and then Toyota.
Yeah, I've got a list because I've been thinking about this around the comments that we received about the thermoform policy. One on the, FDA does have a process, and they express concerns about the same contamination, cross-contamination. So if, I think we should consider recommending that FDA use a third-party review before they certify these, let the company pay for that review as part of the application process. There are over 250 food grade approvals that FDA has given over the last 30 years. I don't know how many are active, but I think I also noted in the Steiner report on the Canadian food grade report that there's a very explicit language in that report that PET thermoform food grade can resolve the issues and concerns that Steiner mentions, particularly on other materials. So I got a direct quote in the thermoform policy we can look at, but I think we need to at least recognize that both the Steiner report and FDA acknowledge the concerns and have expressed either a process in FDA's case or in Steiner an opinion that about those concerns. So I also think we need to be very cognizant of the market development impacts of this. As Commissioner Dell mentioned, there are not only bottle-to-bottle processors, but there's other food grade processors in California. The language from AB 793 requiring post-consumer content for beverage containers is in effect now. And I'd hate to think that what we're doing is enforcing the arguments from the people who oppose post-consumer requirements and creating an avenue for virgin plastic manufacturers to say we just can't get enough supply because we cut off the supply when maybe the process needs to be improved at FDA. And I like the idea of having an opaque container for toxic materials, requiring that. If we can define what those materials are, we have two state agencies, DTSC and OEA, that can probably provide some guidance on that. But if we had an opaque container, then it's probably not going to hit through the optical system, and it would be easy enough to pull manually for those still doing manual sorts, or post-optical if it comes through. So I think that's that's an idea that we should pursue. And then my thought is that those toxic materials, that's the problem. It's not the container, it's the toxic materials. And we have a family friend who's been long and deeply involved in the Roundup issues because of a death in her family. And so I'm familiar with those. And I think, yeah, we should focus on those materials. We should keep them out of our recycling stream. And how we do that, I think, is something else we can address later. But thank you.
Thank you. And I have a quick question.
So I'd like to factually state facts and reply to that. Number one, the problem with the FDA is that all they do is give a letter. If there's two ways that companies can give an FDA approval. One way is to actually do testing on a sample and submit it to the FDA. And then they test it and they look at their process and they get a non-objection letter or not. And then it's listed. But then they get requirements, right? If it's approved, they'll say only food grade sources, right? And that's predominantly for all mechanical and all mechanical recycling, owned for food grade sources, because therein lies the problem. You can't only get food grade sources out of curbside bins. Not going to happen. But after that, the FDA does zero testing. Let's make this clear. Zero testing. They don't, 5 years ago, your factory in Mexico, I'm not going to be racist here, your factory anywhere got an FDA letter. Well, you're supposed to run it at a high vacuum and a high temperature and only use food grade, but it's the honor system. Just like it was the honor system for Aliso Canyon that spewed gas all over, just like it was the honor system for, all the other toxic chemicals that haven't been, disclosed by companies, just like it's the honor system for all the fraudulent pills products we're getting from China and so on. There is no government testing. Now, you could argue, oh, let's make the FDA really do that. I say it's impossible. I say it's not possible for them to come in and enforce and do that. And so to safeguard, we only use from closed systems. Secondly, the Stina report clearly said the vast majority of plastics aren't recyclable. There were some sentences that could be cherry picked that said thermoforms could be recycled, but it didn't say from curbside bins. What it said clearly in that report is that once you put it in a curbside bin, there's infinite layers of toxicity. Lastly, this really comes down to this concept of you look at a curbside recycle bin and you say, will it ever be 0.001% free from toxins? Will we ever keep motor oil out? I mean, I've just shown a few pesticides, but motor oil, all kinds of ranges of things that could be in there, let alone, drugs too, right? Like people's pharmaceuticals and what have you. I say it's impossible. I say we will never make a curbside bin toxic free for food grade. Again, you want to make carpet, you want to make some other things. That's like there's no regulations around cosmetic containers, actually, turns out. That's like a free-for-all. But when we're talking about food, can we not all wrap our arms around and say, gee, this literally could be the rPET that goes into a juice bottle for a kid? Is it really worth it? And around the PET content in bottles for, the required content, sorry, I would rather be on the side of new plastics manufacturers than pushing toxic plastic into bottles just to divert a little bit from a landfill.
Can I respond, Heidi, since that was a response to me?
Sure.
Appropriate. I'm not sure that giving up on the Food and Drug Administration is because it's difficult. I'm not sure that's a good idea. If they're authorizing containers to be used for food grade packaging, then we need to make sure that's a safe process, and we can recommend a policy to federal agencies. So I'll disagree that it's impossible. I do think that we need to be mindful of AB 793, and if we're going to be overturning AB 793 by these actions, then we need to address that. It's in statute. I'm thinking it's going to be impossible to meet the requirements of 793 relying on the CRV return system.
So actually 793, it's interesting because I really studied it. Just so everyone knows, I've studied the law. I think there's just huge gaps in it. I think this strengthens 793, right? Because CalRecycle doesn't even require PET processors who's making that plastic to register until 2 more years. And then they don't require quality certs or anything, right? So it literally could be coming for anywhere for in the next 2 years. And then if you read all these reports that I sent, AB 793 says 1 through 7 shall all have 15% content. Does everyone realize that 2 through 7s, there is no food grade right now on the market? There is 0. So any HDPE product manufacturer that they've been given a mandate that there is none. And you look at the Stina report, it says olefins, HDPE is an olefin, are like the scariest of all.
They're not going to be able to comply. That's evident.
They're going to have, so they're going to have to pay 20 cents, right?
They're
But
not
we
going to be able
can't
to
be
comply.
pushing them into risky plastics to avoid the 20 cents. But I think this is what we have to really consider when we look at these recycled content mandates.
Well,
Is
I'm
that
sorry
plastic
you,
that
I'm
is
sorry
actually
you won't,
safe?
I'm sorry
please
you
don't
won't
talk over
agree
each
that
other.
we can make recommendations to FDAs.
Okay. Just want to make sure people understand what you're saying, and it's hard to hear when.
Yeah, again, you know, I think the manufacturers who are going to comply with 793 are going to have gone through the FDA process, or already gone through the FDA process. If there's a problem with that process, if we should strengthen that process for California, I think it's worth discussing and not dismissing out of hand.
Okay, so we've heard your point of view, and now it's Commissioner Toyota is next, and then after that, I know on the phone is Commissioner Donlevy, and then we'll go to Commissioner Lapis after that.
And then I'm after that, Heidi.
Yep. And then public comment.
Thank you. I also want to say, Jen, that this is really important work, and I really appreciate what you've done on this. What I want to kind of bring up about this policy and the other policy about taking some of the toxics out of plastics is that it's really right now, this is what we know kind of policy, and it addresses everything we know right now. But the issues that I've been grappling with when I'm looking at plastics that are going to be going into compost, now that we can throw our plastic bags in there, I've seen there are some studies that say those Thor crushers that take out the plastics leave microplastics. There are some studies that don't. I mean, there's a lack of real knowledge to a lot of this, and a lack of real monitoring. And I don't know if that can be built into these policies or if it's a separate policy. But this idea that we have to inform good policy on, I think, science and this kind of knowledge and this monitoring of the toxins that are going on inside the recycling system, even as it is right now. You know, they're coming up with new plastics every day. One of the comments was even there's a new plastic bottle that they're going to PG&E, or not PG&E, but Procter & Gamble is going to be using, and we don't know much about this. But at the end of the day, I think in all of this, that we have to have some kind of, this stuff has to be tested. The stuff that's coming out of the compost that we're letting plastics in now, these new bottles, so that these things like the artificial turf don't keep happening. And I think that we need a policy, or to build into these kinds of policies, monitoring and science and funding from the folks who are contributing to this, so that we're not 5 years behind when these things come up every single time. And again, I don't know if it's new. This is kind of what I've come to watching or trying to figure out this composting and plastic policies, that there has to be monitoring, science component, third party, peer reviewed, paid for by the people who are contributing to it. So I don't know if we can build that into what you're doing or if it needs to be separate, but it is something that needs to be there. And then the one last thing about contamination in general is when Oregon passed their policies, their new recycling policies, plastic pollution mitigation and recycling policies, they didn't focus on, we want to ban this, you can't do this. They did not specifically, and almost 90% of it did not say producers will do this. What they did was they said that you are responsible for the contamination now. So they didn't tell them what they could use, to what they could put their products in. They didn't give them any of that. All they said was, if it causes a problem, you pay for it. You get it out of the system and deal with it. And that's what went into the regulation. That's how they handled it. And it passed partly because there wasn't all that pushback of, we need this, or you don't know enough about this and this product. They just said, fine, you can do whatever you want, but you will pay for taking this out of our recycling processes.
Yeah, the
And
problem
that's
with
it.
that approach, which is proven by the PFAS problem is, and all the other corporate trust us things, are all the problems that have been created. And then literally we have to create super fund to pull them all back. And it's one thing when it's just an economic sort of disaster, but it's a different when it's actually gone. They haven't done it right. We've trusted them. They haven't done it right. It's gone into food, it's gone into kids' packaging. So that's the point of the precautionary principle. Again, I'm talking about food grade packaging, right? Not all plastics, not all uses, but literally what can that subset of what can impact human health most directly.
Thank you. And I think it's Commissioner Don Levy next on the phone, and then Commissioner Lapis.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Commissioner Dell. Great work. Definitely a hot topic these days. I've had the chance to talk to people from the beverage manufacturers, water, even thermoform producers recently, and sourcing food grade post-consumer material is a hot topic. The California reclaimers, they do want the material from the closed system, from the buyback. That is the highest quality. That's absolutely food grade material. A lot of the curbside material is now going either to one facility in Southern California or it's heading south of the border where they have cleaning systems and more labor to do the sorting. Talking with people, not all curbside facilities are equal. There's some that have very, very high quality, and it appears that they are able to get food grade out of there, but the concern is still with some of the toxic containers that are in there. I think what Chair Sanborn pointed out at the start, it's these toxic chemicals, these bottles of malathion, acid, chlorine. I think everybody that's operated a curbside program, a MRF, has unfortunately had an employee exposure due to these chemicals that get put into curbside accidentally. I think with 343 and with AB 793, there's some strengthening that needs to be done. You could produce malathion and put it in a PET bottle, and it will get that recycling symbol because a PET bottle will qualify under 343. But under AB 793, the post-consumer content, from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, only applies to beverage containers. So these chemicals don't have any post-consumer requirement when they produce their bottles. So with what Chair Sanborn was talking about, maybe we look at these toxic chemicals and how they get properly labeled. They cannot have a recycling symbol on them. So nobody thinks, let me put this, bottle of pool acid that only has a tablespoon of acid left in it, put it into the curbside bin. Every operator of curbside programs knows that just that little tablespoon can cause serious harm to one of the employees. So good work on this policy. I think we need to look more between the closed and the curbside systems, because I think there are some curbside that can get it. We just need to protect and prevent these toxic bottles from getting in there. And it might be done through proper labeling, labeled as hazardous waste. As Chair Sanborn indicated, maybe a different color. I think that might be a harder obstacle, but I think we need to keep looking at it because it is so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lapis, and then Otsugura, and then public comment.
Thank you, Jan, for sending out over all that information. I've been reading way more studies than I intended to, trying to absorb all the information, and I can't say I have absorbed it all, but there's some recurring themes that seem to be coming out of some of the studies you shared. And I think you teed up a whole bunch of potential policies that really should be addressed. And I'm not sure if they're all necessarily one policy. I mean, one of the things that seems really consistent in the reports that you sent over is that PVC is really toxic. And it's toxic in when you're consuming a product, it's toxic when it's in the recycling, it's toxic when it's in the trash, and it's toxic if it ends up at a landfill or incinerator. And I've seen also similar work on polystyrene, although I don't think it was as much in the studies that you sent over. But that seems like one concrete thing that like we should really not be using PVC for packaging. I mean that seems like an obvious thing. I like the thread today about HHW chemicals and maybe having the packaging for that be somehow designed in a way that it cannot end up in a stream, whether it's the opaque in a recycling stream, whether it's the opaque packaging or the warning or both. That seems like a worthwhile idea as well. I'm still struggling with the idea of us not being able to get food grade PET out of a curbside program. I've been trying to find the more clear, and I probably need to go through your studies a little bit more, but I haven't found super clear guidance that just because a PET bottle is in the same curbside bin as a rodenticide, that the bale of PET bottles that comes out of the optical sorter is contaminated. It seems like their curbside facilities are very different from one another. The processing, the optical sorting, the processing afterwards seems varied. So I just want to be careful that we don't allow any toxic ingredients to recirculate back into food grade packaging while making sure we don't foreclose on recycling stuff that we can recycle. Because not recycling also has a very toxic impact from fossil fuel extraction and processing and refining, et cetera. So I don't want to totally foreclose on the idea of curbside material being food grade, but it does seem like we need additional safeguards. And I think you made a compelling case that we need additional safeguards and maybe some kind of ongoing testing. Again, I kind of had a similar thought as John about the FDA seems to be where this is, where there are some loopholes that need to be plugged, but what are the chances that the FDA is going to care about our recommendations? And so maybe we do need to have some kind of processes in place for safeguards in California. And then finally, I know this has come up a few different contexts, not just in the commission, of, well, how are we requiring recycled content in something that doesn't have any approved recycled content? And the fact of the matter is that the laws specifically call out that a manufacturer can pay a fine if they do not use recycled content. And I think that's incredibly important, because if we were just take them out of the bills, it would be an incentive to switch to those packaging types. Right now, they have to pay a pretty big penalty in order to keep using those packaging types, but taking them out altogether would actually have the exact opposite effect and increase use of things like PVC packaging. So I just want to make sure that we, in any policy, make sure we don't create an artificial incentive to use the more toxic or less recyclable option. I had a couple other thoughts too, but I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. I'm going to keep reading all the content, and I hope that we focus a decent amount on toxics in our next report and maybe have a suite of recommendations. Yeah, thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I think what this brings up is all the unintended consequences we really need to think through of any policy legislation. You raise a really good point about the 2 through 7s, where there is no food grade content, and there's little chance that you would make safe food grade content, but we don't want to let that as an out, right? So this is where we really need to just say, oh, food grade content, somebody go figure it out. No, we really need to think through, well, we're going to find them and this is really going to be a revenue generator, then what is that money going to go to? Or things like that. Or I'm going to go ahead and say it, is material substitution better? Okay, we're not locked into PET thermoforms. There are compostable, recyclable, non-PFAS, beautiful, reusable, and fiber-based thermoforms in the world, right? So there's alternatives as well. And yes, bans. And the PVC, please, would you run with that baton? I'm too tired. I've taken on 2 new policies here to push forward. I wish you would. Would you please take on banning PVC packaging?
You know, the funny thing is I had a
We're
prep
gonna have to
meeting
wrap
with
this
my
up. I'm
boss.
sorry. We're running out of time.
Yeah, okay. You know, I agree. I'll just leave it at that. I apologize.
Yeah. And I remember the last meeting I brought up specifically on even thermoforms. I thought it was time to ban the sale of thermoforms of PET for the and PVC, or I'm sorry, PVC for that very reason. I mean, we've got too much contamination flying around the system that we've got to cut off at the source, I think. We've got public comments, then Commissioner Valle, please.
You skipped me, Commissioner. Sandberg. I'll make it quick. Jan, thank you for bringing this extremely important topic to the commission. I want to more, probably concentrate on the household hazardous waste products that are out there. And whatever container they use, those containers do not belong in any of the curbside program, any of them. I mean, to Jan, I think, Jan, I don't know if you made this point, but I'll kind of highlight it. They do not belong in the curbside program. And definitely we as a commission should look at, clear truth in labeling labels on these products. They're hazardous and they should be part of the HHW program and go there. They should not go in any of the containers, even those that go into the final end of life of those materials. And then easily identifiable. I think it's extremely important that we discuss how they're identified, whether those are products that are, cleaners like Jan showed, but, we see fertilizers sometimes end up in the containers. There's all sorts of different products out there that are in containers, and those have to be, once again, labeled correctly so that the consumer, when it looks at it, it's very clear, do not put these in your containers. And number 2, easily identifiable. So, thank you once again, Jan, for bringing that to our attention. I just want to make sure that I'm very clear. I think the industry will tell you, do not put them in the containers. They don't belong there. So, thank you.
Once again, they're confused because it's got chasing arrows. And that's exactly what we were talking about. So yeah, really good point. And again, with induction stoves, it's really good to know that because I just am getting my induction stove this week. Okay, so let's go to public comment and then we'll go to Commissioner Valle and then Ferrante.
Okay, there are 3 public comments. The first 2 are from Susan Collins with the Container Recycling Institute. The first one, comment, PET bales collected through the deposit system are segregated as recycle center bales versus bales from curbside systems. They are kept separate from each other, sold to different reclaimers, and worth different prices. Beverage brands demand that only food grade materials are used to make beverage bottles. Right now, food grade bales are worth much more per pound than curbside bales, 20 cents per pound maybe. The second comment from Susan Collins is the additives are getting lost in this discussion. There are additives that are allowed to be used in food grade bottles and other additives are allowed to be used in non-food grade bottles. If you melt the 2 types of bottles together, you will introduce the prohibited additive chemicals into the entire batch, making the entire batch unsuitable for food grade uses. The next comment is from Kate Eagles with the Association of Plastic Recyclers. The recycled content process uses robust, dedicated technology and processes. I urge the Commission to charge themselves with talking to technology providers, reclaimers, and brand companies using recycled content. You need more information to have this discussion. Also, California collects close to 25% of the total post-consumer PET collected in the USA. This will go a long way toward meeting the mandates of 793.
Is that it?
That's it.
Very good, Jeffrey. Thank you very much. And thanks to our commenters, Vice Chair Valle and then Commissioner Ferrante.
A final comment to Commissioner Dell and Commissioner Snyder. We've had other policies where we've invited third parties to come in to speak on the issue. I would recommend and suggest that your committee allow third-party scientists, to Commissioner Toyoda's concern, let's talk about the science and get some third-party analysis of this. So clearly, whatever we decide on ultimately is not biased. And let's allow the industry to come to the table as well to speak on their behalf so we have a fair and balanced report. By the time that we come up with a policy, we've heard from all sides, and then we can reach some consensus. Thank you.
I would love to get the FDA to come if it's possible. I'll reach out. We'll see if they do. And we definitely can have all the experts in. The thing is, experts usually carry their own agenda, right? So we can have all the voices come and talk. And if just brainstorming, if Commissioner Schneider and I are allowed to talk with key stakeholders and then give a feedback, and then the commission can say, yeah, we'd like them in particular to come. I mean, I'm just cognizant of the commission's time. And again, this is a policy idea. This is a big concept, right? I'm not like one specific thing of let's change labels, right? This is a bigger over concept. If we want to break out the PVC idea first and run with that, let's go for it. If you want to break out the idea of making these all bright red and run with that, that would be great too. The bigger concept of is curbside collection safe for food grade or not is the big thorny issue. Let's put our cards on the table. And that may take longer, and that may take longer than this session to get to, right? And to Commissioner Toyoda's point, let's not rush to judgment on it.
Thank you, Commissioner Ferrante.
Yeah, thanks. Exactly, Jan, this is a big issue, and I am, I think everyone here today is grateful that you brought this topic up because it is very important. I do appreciate what you said at the beginning about taking our time going through this, because I think this has been a very, illuminating discussion just amongst the commissioners. And it seems to me, I agree with what a lot of people said here, it seems really at its heart, it's about, well, obviously it's about toxics and contamination, but there are the HHW issues, there are labeling issues, there are designing for recyclability issues when taken, of course, in conjunction with the other proposal that you have today. So I do think that the issue goes beyond the way that it's presented in this first draft of your proposal. So, and like you said, and like others said, I don't know if that means we throw it all in here together or we break out a lot of different components into separate proposals. But, I think the issue goes farther up the line from the curbside bin, because I do share the concern that others mentioned here, Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Lapis, about what the market impact might be from this proposal as is on recyclable material, and whether we'd be losing viable recyclable material with this proposal as is, that material that would end up in landfill, that there is a way to divert that material. So suffice it to say, I think this is a great place to start. I think the discussion has been really great, and I look forward to addressing some of these issues further on, within this proposal and with some separate proposals as well.
Yeah, thanks. And I think, if everybody agrees, I think, breaking off some, like the additives one, that's why we made it separate. We could take PVC packaging on if someone else wants to lead it. But I just want to make clear, I'm only talking about food grade packaging. So we're not talking about food grade or landfill, right? Where are all the uses for the plastics that are the 9% of plastics that are getting recycled, right? It's going to carpet, it's going to piping, other non-human contact kind of stuff. So that doesn't preclude that, right? It's just protecting this most crucial small part of the Venn diagram of human contact. That's what we're talking about.
Thank you. And we're going to have to wrap this up. We're running a little over time. So Commissioner Lapis, if you can keep it quick, and then I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, just a quick thought. I would love to get OEHA involved in this, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. I don't know for a fact that the current staff there are experts on any of this, but they are, I think, the state body that's best equipped to really go through the details of the science.
So I was thinking that too. Commissioner Schneider, do you have something quick to add?
Thank you. Very quick. PVC piping has its own problems, and San Francisco, I believe, banned it decades ago from new construction, because when it burns, it puts everybody at risk. So, you know, some of those non-food things are just as bad.
Good point. Yeah, that's not necessarily under our purview, but I guess I want to kind of try and wrap this up. Great conversation. Thank you so much, Commissioner Dell, for all your hard work on this. To me, this could be one of the big policies recommendations that we have in this July report update. That could be really, really helpful. And I was just looking back at 343 Truth in Labeling Bill and our recommendation for that led to that, and then the precautionary principle policy and the household hazardous waste EPR framework, because it made me think, Commissioner Ward, maybe you and I can look at those things and actually update the EPR framework policy, which was our #1 policy since we started, and add this labeling bit to it, that we've got a very dangerous group of chemicals that need to have a different type of container that's very, very obvious what's in it is hazardous, and that never gets a chasing arrow or anything like that that could contaminate the streams. And maybe we recommend that the legislature take, if they're not ready to go EPR for the framework, at least please take up this labeling piece, because this is really critical to keeping the rest of our streams clean. But that's just a thought I had, that maybe Commissioner Ward and I could look at that and bring a potential update to that policy. Would that make sense? Or we could discuss it with everybody together at the next meeting. And I'm sure others have other ideas that you could work on.
So if I heard you correctly, what you're suggesting is just the piece regarding the labeling of the containers that are holding hazardous materials to try to keep that, correct?
And the container itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a workable way forward from my perspective.
And I think there's a lot of agreement. It seems like that's important, and because we already have kind of a policy on that, and then we can just weave in and make sure it aligns with, like, I have to go reread 343 and see how much of this would apply to hazardous, and how much we address this or not. But now I'm really concerned that we should try to quickly make sure those containers are very easily identifiable and certainly don't have chasing arrows and things that can misinform people to put them in curbside programs or recycling bins. And that should
I think this is a great idea, but I'd like to ask you to specifically look into this issue of, I'm not sure they would actually be called hazardous. I don't believe this is a hazard. What it is a liquid a product that contains an acute toxin. Acutely toxic. You look it up on the little thing. I stood there in Home Depot and did it. And it said acutely toxic, but it's not a hazardous waste, right? So, but it still shouldn't go in the curbside bin. So
that's what he and I can discuss. Is I think that actually can be considered hazardous. Now, that would the average person consider it hazardous and put it in a hazardous waste facility and go to all that time and trouble? Chances are probably no. They'd look at that chasing arrow on the bottom and put them in the curbside bin. So anyway, that's just one piece of it. Are there other, because I think this is like, I would encourage everybody to be noodling on this. And I think this should be like a standing agenda item. Do you all agree with that? To keep bringing back ideas? Okay, great. So let's just give this time and space. If there's people that you want to invite to speak to us about this, let me know. We can invite them to the agenda if we think it's a good use of time, which I'm very careful to guard your time and not bring in people that I don't think are really going to help us get somewhere unless you all agree.
And again, I'm going to warn you that there's different groups with different agendas. So I'm very careful.
We've all been through this already, so I think we're pretty aware at this point. Okay, well, that was really good. Thank you so much for bringing this up, Commissioner Dell. Excellent examples as always, and it always raises my hair on the back of my neck when I see some of this stuff, because it is scary what's getting out there. Okay.
Chair Sanborn, just a quick addition.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, with the labeling, definitely agree with that. But maybe steer the manufacturers away from using PET #1 or HDPE #2, where the optical sorters do a fantastic job, and that ends up in most of the beverage containers. So not only some labeling enforcement, but moving them into a number 5, a number 6, a number 7, some other bottle other than number 1 or number 2.
Well, so that I'm gonna,
that,
yeah, I get your point, but I guess I'm trying to figure out with 343, is that driving them to 1 and 2s, and is that gonna hurt us? Like with hazardous, I think it's separate, kind of a really important separate issue. So excellent points. Great job, commissioners. I think that was really, really good discussion. But we have to move on to have time because we had 2 commissioners work very hard on agenda item number 6, the thermoform policy proposal discussion, and it's already going to be a shorter discussion, about an hour. So I want to turn this over to Commissioners Davis and Osigura, who took our comments from the last meeting and came back with another version. So I'll turn it over to them to explain. And I posted the clean version and the track changes version, so you can all see both. Commissioner Davis or Osigura?
Yes, good morning. And Commissioner Davis, that did the brunt of the redlining, will jump in to explain the language. So I'll provide a overall comment to folks, and later I'm sure everybody will dive into a discussion. We attempted, and so let me highlight that again, we attempted to remove language where there seemed to be no support from different commissioners. You know, it seems, as we discussed previously, that the thermoform draft recommendation that initially came to the commission started going in very many different directions, which included conversations about the bottle bill, discussions about, you know, plastics and food safety, discussions about how it's funded, where it's funded, and is it being subsidized. And so, once again, we attempted to remove all that language. Both Commissioner Davis and I could not get to really coming to recommendations. So it's basically a red line document trying to eliminate those areas that there was not support by commissioners. And so, you know, once again, Commissioner Davis will go through the wording, but in essence, it tries to go back to the initial language, the elimination of language that people did not agree to, without recommendations of what to move forward. I think it might be one of those topics that we should spend more time on some of those things that are critical to recycling markets and the topics that we've been discussing this morning. And maybe this is one that we really can't get to consensus in terms of the language. So Commissioner Davis, did I miss anything? And please go through the language that was redlined, but I think that's where we're at. Once again, this red line does not have recommendations. It's an attempt to remove language that folks were not in agreement with. And broad topics there are about, you know, beyond the intent of the initial language, bottle bill discussion, safety discussion, funding discussion, and all those items. So over to you, Commissioner Davis.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the one add to what Commissioner Osigura said, we really scaled back on the recommendations portion, but we beefed up the background portion to include some information that was, I think, brought up about reusable food serviceware, about materials like other non-PET thermoforms, but put in language from the plastic pack that recommends a number of items that should be eliminated over the next 3 years, but did not include recommendations about that. We tried to hone the recommendations to focus solely on the thermoform issue. There's also language, as I mentioned on the prior discussion, about the thermoforms as food grade. And if you want to go up, we could start up there. I also addressed, we had some public comments about some inaccurate language in the first paragraph. Yeah, about the actual process of making thermoforms, and the structural flexibility comes through a heating process, not a chemical process. So we corrected that. the Environmental and Climate Change Canada language that Commissioner Dell brought up last time talks about PET thermoforms being different than bottles. And then if you scroll down just a bit more, yeah, there, addressing potential contamination by non-food grade packaging. The report indicated, it's actually a direct quote from the report, in general, all PET clamshells are aggregated and baled regardless of original use, meaning not all recycled thermoform PET packages are food packages. However, because inputs are known and the process is designed to remove any predicted contaminants, the material can and is processed back to food grade recycled PET to be used in new PET food grade packages. So that's the quote that I mentioned, and just wanted to call that out. There is additional language down there. Now you're looking at the plastic pack language. So the list of items that Plastic Pack proposes eliminated include some labeling, coloring, pigmentation, and if you go down just a little bit more onto the next, yeah, and also eliminating polystyrene and PVC. So again, this was something that I think Chair Sanborn brought up about limiting the composition of thermoforms that would be subject to a recycled content policy. But once again, we did not put a recommendation in at this point because we wanted to just focus as closely as we could on thermoforms. You want to keep scrolling. I think, yeah, the rest of it was unchanged. Yeah, and what you're seeing now is I actually moved the content requirements apart, and so this is showing as a red line, but this was language from the prior version. It was just moved in the draft. So there was no language change. It was just a reorganization to make it easier if we wanted to pull things out. Same thing here, same language, just pulled down from another section. So these are the specific proposals that there should be recycled content requirements set for PET thermoforms, post-consumer minimum content linked to financial incentives that are adequate to cover collection and processing costs. If optical or other mechanical sorting is desired, thermoform manufacturers need to financially support system upgrades. That shows as new language, but again, it was just moved up as actually the first one was at the prior meeting. Then big change on the next one, this left in language that CalRecycle should resume individual commingled rate studies for MRF separating thermoforms and base those rates on baled material. Took out the rest of the language about having a separate commingled rate. Commissioner Donlevy had expressed concerns about changing changing or not changing. So that recommendation on the individual commingled rate study has been in all the drafts through all the different co-authors. So it's still in there. The scrap value needs to be sufficient to develop functioning markets, and manufacturers that need the material should pay prices to drive supply. I'm not sure that there's any more. Let's see. Yeah, that's it. So scaled back recommendations, added some background language around comments that were received. I think we skipped over the language about the edible food, single-use edible food. There it is. Yeah. Go down, go down. There. So I did add on here, California communities are beginning to adopt reusable food service ordinances. I verified with Upstream that there are 8 in place now, and they also have they track legislation across the world. So entire countries like Ireland and Germany have eliminated single-use in place of reusable dishes for on-site dining. And so there's some language in here, but again, no recommendations. And I think given the discussion we just had about the food grade, certainly the recommendation on minimum content has to be viewed in that sense. I would definitely, I like the idea of bringing OWIA on board and maybe link these with some of the discussion that we just held to try to address concerns about the appropriate approval process for food grade. So that's it.
Okay. I'll just quick start and say, obviously to me, removing contamination from this stream is the first thing to do before we get to the rest of it. So I still stand by trying to ban the sale of the non-PET thermoforms because the others are just contaminating the system. But with that, I think who was next? I believe it was Commissioner Dell and then Don Levy. Is that right?
I'd actually like to start with a big picture question. There is a bill being discussed at the California State Legislature about recycled content and thermoforms right now. It was proposed, I think it didn't pass, it's gonna be proposed again. So I question, should our commission be working on this? To me, this seems like lobbying. If a commissioner wants to influence that bill and what's in that bill and is there financial rewards, is food grade safe or not, I feel that that should happen at that level and that our commission shouldn't be having the same discussion that would influence a legislation that is in discussion now. Can we discuss that?
Happy to. I completely disagree. We're an advisory body to give advice to legislators. And if they're discussing something that's under our purview, to me, now is the exact time we should be discussing this.
Okay, well, I'll agree to disagree. And I think individual commissioners can do that from their own perspective. But as a commission-based thing, once we're in this play, then that is lobbying in effect, right?
No,
that is lobbying.
As a person who has 3 attorneys, I'm very clear on the lobbying rules, and there's no lobbying if we're not, even as a commission, we're not even supporting bills. We agreed to make sure we didn't even cross that line. We're advisory. We can have full discussions. We can give our advice, and then individual commissioners can go do what they want to do on lobbying. But we don't lobby. We don't. And when we did present to even staff of members, it was just the vice chair and I, just the facts, Jack, about what this commission did and take questions. So that lobbying, direct lobbying, is saying, you legislator, we support your bill, we don't, and this is why. Grassroots lobbying is when we tell the world, we want you to support Bill X. We're not doing that. So that's just my clear feedback from my lawyer who I talk to frequently.
So public perception of the common person is that we're trying to influence it, but I'll defer to your lawyer. So then the second point is, I do believe that this is inadequate to protect human health. I raised that the last time. A couple sentences were taken out of the Stina report, but there's a huge body of other research that clearly say closed systems. Stina report talked about what if liquid happened, and it goes in. And per our previous discussion, I don't support anything that that promotes using thermoforms to go back into thermoforms. So I will vote no on that as it is to protect human health. The second part, I think it's clear. I think we need to put this out there that this is really, this recycled content law would benefit a couple manufacturers who are recycling thermoforms who are in Mexico. As far as I know, there's no operations in the US. I've done research. Right now, the the two thermoform manufacturers are actually taking thermoforms from Mexico and getting our truckloads of some down there. And the consensus is from plastic manufacturers is no one wants to operate a thermoform recycling facility in the US. So I believe that's waste imperialism. If we're going to promote a recycled content that relies on cheap labor and poor environmental regulations in Mexico, where there's no transparency of what's happening, and then it calls into question of what's the oversight of the safety of what's really getting into that factory in Mexico, I don't think it's a viable business model. And so for those two reasons, mostly the toxics, but secondly, the fact that it's we'd be pushing this to Mexico. I don't believe that this is a good policy for Californians or for our neighbors to the south.
Okay, Commissioner Dunleavy.
Good morning, thank you. Limited battery space, so I save my video time for now. With the commissioners that worked on this, we are all volunteers, and it's admirable the amount of time that people put on these different policies. Commissioner Davis has spent time on this one, Commissioner Sanborn, myself, and now Commissioner Oseguera. And I agree with what Commissioner Sanborn said earlier, where it shouldn't be a lobbying organization. And with this provision, I think we are trying to influence existing legislation that's underway with Assembly Bill 478. It looks like we're trying to introduce what could be interpreted as amendments. So I do think that falls under the lobbying. So I don't know that we should be talking about this one, but it's out there, so we'll keep going. The policy is written is looking at basically amending 478 to include individual commingled rates for facilities that are separating thermoforms. I think right now there's 8, maybe 10. Some people might say there's 12 facilities that are actually separating thermoforms. They are doing the right thing. So it's suggesting a one-way reward for just a few facilities. I don't think we should be recommending policies that are one way. As I've said in the past about individual commingled rates, I think it should apply both up and down. If somebody has good quality, that should be looked at. But if somebody has quality that's not very good, that should also be looked at. Looking at individual facility rates, that's the bottle bill. That's a completely separate discussion, much longer discussion. I don't think it should be involved in a thermoform post-consumer content policy, because that's a non-bottle bill commodity, and we should not be mixing the two. If you want to fix the bottle bill, fix the bottle bill, but don't try and tweak the bottle bill to help a non-bottle bill item. So I'm opposing the policy because it's mixing the two. I don't think we should. It's rewarding just a few facilities that are doing the right thing. Going through some of the details on this, I don't think we should have any policy that suggests or dictates pricing conditions that facilities should receive, because it's going to be different from facility to facility based on volume, based on quality. And the high volume facilities in the larger population, manufacturers will go there because they could get a higher source of material. So I think if you're suggesting higher pricing, it's going to disproportionately affect the lower volume rural facilities. The high volume sites could put in the equipment to do the sorting and do the recovery, but the low volume sites wouldn't. They would have a higher operating cost, and they would be affected by higher contamination if they're not sorting it. So any reference to price should not be in any policy that we suggest, because now we're talking about affecting how the free market should apply to different facilities. It should be based on facilities quality and quantity. But we shouldn't include that in any policy. The same thing goes for having them pay for mechanical sorting equipment. Again, that would focus the higher volume, higher population sites and disproportionately not benefit the lower volume rural sites. They would just target Southern California. That's where they could get the most. So those would be the facilities that would benefit. The rural facilities would not benefit from such a policy. Item 3, individual commingled rates. Again, we just can't be talking about the bottle bill to support a non-bottle bill item. And then number 5, thermoform scrap value needs to sufficiently be increased to develop functioning markets. When the supply is there and the quality is there, the price will be there. So, so I appreciate the attempts to accommodate some of my requests, but as written, I would have to oppose this because, again, there's active legislation, and then we're trying to mix up the bottle bill to help a non-bottle bill item.
Okay, I'm just going to say on the record that we're not lobbying. We're an advisory commission. We're giving advice. That's what we were actually tasked to do. So I really don't want the word lobbying out there. It's not a good look. And the fact that commissioners keep saying that concerns me. So if you have questions about what lobbying is, I can go over it again. Okay, so that's that. As far as what you think, that's fine. Let's talk about that. So Commissioner Lapis, I think you were next.
Yeah, I was going to make a very similar comment. I mean, the whole point of this commission is to advise policymakers, whether that's CalRecycle or the legislature. And the things we've accomplished so far are things that were introduced as bills based on our recommendations. So, you know, let me maybe set aside the issue of the specific proposal. In terms of broader precedent, I would really hate it if we weren't able to work on things that are proposed in legislation, because that's the venue that a lot of us propose our policy ideas in. And sometimes policy ideas get introduced for a decade straight before they move. And if the fact that they're being introduced precludes us from commenting on it, it'll make us, you know, irrelevant. And then also from a broader perspective of the financing and economics, I mean, also, I think that's a huge part of our charge is to make sure we recommend policies that ensure that the economics of recycling function and that create markets. And that by definition means, you know, investments, whether they come from the state or from manufacturers or whoever. I would also hate to preclude anything in that realm, because again, that's, I feel like, handicapping ourselves for no reason. And then as far as the specific policies here, I mean, I'm comfortable with the proposal as is, but we are a consensus body, and it seems pretty clear we do not have a consensus. The same group of folks did not have a consensus in the legislature on 478. So, I mean, I'm not sure where we move forward unless we decide to move away from consensus, but I don't think folks want to do that necessarily. I think our strength comes from being able to say, hey, these 17 different perspectives all agreed on X, Y, Z. So, you know, I'm not going to disagree with any of the substance that Jeff or Jan raised. I hear that they are not comfortable supporting this. I think that's fair. I did have a concern with the lobbying and the other comments that were made in that realm.
So I'm going to make a suggestion. I know Commissioner Dell's put her starter back in there, but I just want to make sure, has any other commissioner want to speak to this? Because it looks to me like we're going to have to separate if there's bits and pieces from this that we can all agree on, because clearly the majority, we do not have agreement. So it looks like Commissioner Sky, do you want to go first? Then I'll circle back to Commissioner Dell.
Just very briefly, Nick said everything that I wanted to, so I won't repeat anything he said regarding consensus. And, you know, I refamiliarized myself with it. We do strive for consensus, and I think it's very important that we continue to do that. The approach we took is that if we cannot reach consensus, but a majority of our commissioners want to move forward with a policy, that we note what the policy is and then note what the concerns were. And so that is a fallback. But I think Chair Sanborn makes a good recommendation that we might want to break out the pieces that we do have consensus on, try to move those forward. The other thing that I was hoping is, with the two policies that were discussed today, if they're not in conflict with each other, the first policy does a much better job in addressing that core issue, that concern of food grade plastics and the contamination there. And if those two can move forward simultaneously, that maybe it would address Commissioner Dell's concerns.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Commissioner Dell and then Don Levy, and then Ward.
No, it doesn't address my concerns. Any reference to the safety of recycling food, these collected through curbside bins is a no-go for me, period. This issue of lobbying, okay, it's a word that has some legal definition to some people, and then we can use the word influence as well, which is what the public perceives. This commission may all agree on certain things, I hope, like this should not be labeled as recycled. We can all go, yes, we all agree. Let's write a policy to that. Let's tell the legislature. And then the reality is, on other issues, such as this thermoform issue that has financial elements that Commissioner Dunleavy doesn't agree with, and I agree with him, I don't agree either, and then toxics elements that I don't agree with, it's not a consensus. And so at this point, I say the alternative is, instead of trying to use the commission to push this issue, each individual commissioner goes and talks to the legislature and stakeholders who are all voting on this, and let your position be known, instead of using the commission to do that. Where we have disagreement, I do not believe that we should do that. And on the food grade one, clearly there's not agreement. And I'm not pushing it forward to say, let's go push that, let's get a majority, I want to push my way forward. I'm saying, let's stop and think about it.
Okay, well,
so,
Commissioner Dow, we just heard from both you and Commissioner Dunleavy that you do not support this policy. We totally hear you. So, you know, this was the first time it came back addressing comments that we gave the last meeting, and we're listening and we're hearing where everybody lands. So let's see if there's anybody else. I'm going to go to Commissioner Ward first before I go back to Commissioner Dunleavy, since we haven't heard from him yet.
Well, I just wanted to mention, as long as we're talking about categories where we should step, regarding subsidies, especially with regards to plastics, I once again want to reiterate the policies we've already adopted addressing resource extraction subsidies, in which the market does not start as level. The market starts with over incentives for the extraction of resources that lead to the production of plastics, and therefore plastics are artificially cheap in terms of their use for packaging and other things. So I don't think we can or should divorce ourselves from discussions about finances or toxics, because they relate to these very topics we're trying to address. Regarding food grade separation, particularly, I think this becomes somewhat of a conflict between the folks who are trying to provide curbside collection services and the grocers, because the grocers or the folks who are selling to the grocers are the ones who are deciding the packages that are available within the grocery store shelves. And if they're food grade things, then they need to have a food grade system that they are supporting. And that right now, the only system that we have is the bottle bill. And so the question to me becomes, if you're going to separate food grade plastics, what are we going to do to engage the grocers in creating a system that supports the recovery of those materials? Thank you.
Okay, are there any other commissioners that wish to speak to this before we wrap this up? I know, I see you in the queue. I was looking for any other commissioners that hadn't spoken. Okay, so we'll go ahead and go to Commissioner Dunleavy.
Okay, thank you, Chair Sanborn. As one of the originating co-authors of this policy, what are we trying to do differently that's not covered under Assembly Bill 478? What new policy are we trying to do to promote thermoform post-consumer content that's not already covered under 478? What's the motive behind this policy recommendation that we're trying to move forward.
I'm going to speak for
Can I,
myself, but John, just because this commission has gone round and round about this, even when the bill was in last year. And so it was our task to try and give advice. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But we've been trying all different angles, trying to figure out, is there consensus amongst this group? There may not be. And if that's the case, that's fine. That's a signal to the legislature as well. Right?
But what are we trying to do differently with this bill or this
Can I
policy
respond?
that's not
Can I respond?
covered under
Yeah, of
78?
course, Commissioner Davis.
Did I respond? You know, and Commissioner Donlevy recalls he was a co-author of one version that included language about the individual commingle rate study that you supported and now don't support. So that, you know, that's the difficulty, of course. I mean, that's you're right. But the individual commingle rate study recommendation here is that it be based upon the bales that are shipped. It be the same process that's in the QIP. Remove the reliance on the QIP. There's no reference to the QIP. Rewarding MRFs for having higher CRV content in their bales is not a reward for thermoforms. It's a reward for having a higher CRV bottle content in the bales. And you recall we talked about this at length. That recommendation is unchanged through all the drafts. And it's the only remaining recommendation around specific financial terms. The language that you referenced on the pricing incentives should come from the manufacturers is language that really derived, in my mind, a lot from what your most recent comments, that we should not rely on the CRV system. Commissioner Dell made the same comments, asking the manufacturers to step up and pay a price for the scrap material that incentivizes and covers the cost of that material is not relying on the CRV system. So, you know, we can go back to 478. This has been under discussion since October. Started working on it in September. The 478 was held in Appropriations Committee, I think, in August. So, you know, they're independent of each other. The only correlation between 478 and the recommendation is the recycled content language. And now we have another discussion that's going on that might obviate that language or modify that language. But again, people are making PET thermoform, food grade thermoforms today using recycled content. Are we going to pull the rug on that process? And they're doing it in California. It's not only in Mexico. There are at least 3 companies I'm aware of in Southern California that have permission and are making food grade PET thermoforms. We had submittal that the chair sent to us of 3 comments from 2 from MRF operators and 1 from one of the companies. So we can pull the rug on that, and we can allow the virgin material manufacturers who object to recycled content manufacturing to flood the market with virgin content thermoforms if that's your preference. And so, you know, we talked about at length about food grade. I understand that. But yeah, it's part of the recommendation. It's been part of the recommendation since the first time it appeared in October.
Okay, we've heard from everybody. I think that one.
Chair Sanborn, just a chance to address some of those items. Yes, as far as my participation engaging in individual commingled rates, it was for all facilities, not just a select few. Because if we're going to have a fair playing field, we should look at all facilities, not just those that are doing the separation of thermoforms, because they're truly doing the right thing. Not trying to pull the rug, because thermoforms are a highly recyclable, highly desired item. Unfortunately, there's not enough MRFs that are doing the separation. And that's a result of some flaws in the bottle bill. that allow that material to go in with the bottles. And it inflates the value much greater than the scrap value. So again, this seems more like we're trying to do a tweak or a fix to the bottle bill, which is a much bigger discussion, rather than looking at just a thermoform post-consumer. If we can address the issue with the commingled rate, which I think is trying to be addressed in Assembly Bill 478, that has some people that are in favor, other people that are opposed to it. That's a much bigger discussion with the bottle bill of what the facilities are able to claim as CRV. So I don't support it as written with this, because it's just a one-way street. Only a select few facilities would benefit. Yes, some could have the incentive to start doing the separation, but until the bottle bill is fixed, the supply of thermoforms, I think, is limited to the select few facilities that are doing the right thing.
Again, it's a thermoform policy, and thermoforms are in PET bales. They're not in aluminum bales, in glass.
Guys,
So
I think we're going in circles.
that's
Things we've talked about for months. I don't think this is new information to anybody at this point. So I'm going to make a recommendation that we go through the recommendations that were in the policy one at a time and see if there's any that have consensus. And if there's things on here that we can find consensus on, great. If we can't, that's fine. And if there's something else that we should add and discuss, that's fine too. And then, you know, after many, many months of trying to come up with consensus around this, if we can't today, we can decide if we're done with this, right? And then we can't give advice on this particular piece. So what is okay? I see thumbs up. Is anybody else opposed to that process? I'll just quickly go through the recommendations. Oh, thank you so much, Commissioner Ward. So we'll start with the first proposal, which says recycled content requirements should be set for PET thermoforms. I've already heard at least 2 commissioners say they will not vote for this because of the concerns over hazardous materials ending up in the recycled content. So I don't think we have consensus on this piece. Is that accurate?
And can I just ask that actually is what's in Ting's bill? That part is already over there, right? So can we let that bill address that?
We are an advisory body, and we can advise on bills in play, bills being conceived, bills that were passed. We can advise at any point in the process. So that's irrelevant. But my understanding is you would not support this. So I'm suggesting we do not vote on this.
Right,
Because,
I won't support it.
right, okay. So then that will not be a recommendation one from this commission because we don't have consensus unless the group agreed to do the alternative, which I think would be an absolute last resort, and I'm not necessarily supporting that. Okay, number 2, if optical or other mechanical sorting is desired to improve quality, thermoform manufacturers need to financially support system upgrades. I personally support that. Is there anybody who doesn't support this? Okay, that sounds pretty unanimous. So
on that, I don't support it because I think the smaller facilities wouldn't get the same attention that the larger facilities would. I don't think we should be pushing that. If that's what they want to do, they can choose to do it. But I think the way that that's written, the smaller facilities, especially in the rural areas, would not get the same attention as the larger facilities in the higher population areas.
Do you have suggestions to refine the language so it would ensure and protect the rural areas?
Not at this point.
Can we say if optical or other mechanical sorting is desired to improve quality, thermoform manufacturers need to financially support system upgrades equally and fairly throughout California in both urban and rural communities? It's advice. We're not writing regulation.
So who would be the oversight or the enforcement with that?
If we were to recommend, we give general recommendations, and this could be Cal Recycle looks at this and they have their ideas, the legislature could look at it, and then the sausage making starts. Or we could be very specific and say exactly what we think, who should be in charge of this. Who do you think should be in charge of it? Cal Recycle? I
Chair
don't know.
Sandberg, can you
Oh,
weigh in
sure.
on this?
Sure, Kobe.
So, Commissioner Dunleavy, I think we might be overthinking this issue because it's not as if every MRF in every rural area would necessarily want to be provided this equipment and participate in that marketplace. It should make sense for both parties. And that's something that I think we've been clear in our EPR policies, that we want to create the market incentives and have manufacturers responsible. So I think the way this is written, particularly with the addition right now, to do this equally and fairly, but it does put the onus on the manufacturers. And if it makes sense for them to work with the larger companies, that's a market-driven approach. I don't know that it makes sense for us to over-regulate and decide which MRFs the manufacturers need to work with. And, it needs to be mutual. So if they don't get enough supply from the larger facilities, they'll be required to work with the smaller facilities to meet those goals. But it should be something that's market-driven.
Yeah, that's actually my point. Why are we even legislating this? If the product company manufacturers want it, if they want to include recycled content, then they'll go make an investment. We've actually seen the polypropylene industry consortium give out grants to like 7 facilities, and they're doing it market-based. Why are we trying to intervene in this and put this as some sort of legislative thing? The market, if there's really value for this, then the market will take care of it. By the way, I just want to say, outside of California, only 6% of MRFs accept thermoforms.
And with this, with number 2, we're jumping right into curbside is the first solution. It doesn't look like we're opening the door for source separation, going back to recycling centers or redemption centers. Who knows, there may be a day where a better solution is to have thermoforms in the bottle bill, or some redemption program, or they create their own EPR system. So with this, it almost looks like we're putting a preference towards curbside and sorting systems rather than source separated programs, either going back to the stores or going to recycling centers. So I'm still not comfortable with number 2.
Okay, so we don't have consensus even on number 2. Commissioner Lapis.
Sorry. I do read number 2 as saying that manufacturers should take responsibility and fund the recycling infrastructure. I'm not sure how that's different from what we've been advocating in a bunch of other policies. And as far as curbside, I mean, we are the Commission on Curbside Recycling and Market Development. That's literally the name of our entity. There are a few organizations that love the bottle bill and deposit systems as much as CAW, but there's a lot of other material as well in the curbside system that we need to get recycled.
Okay, well, I hear at least 2 commissioners that are not going to support this, so we'll have to move on. Number 3, Cal Recycle should resume ICRS for MRFs separating thermoforms and base those rates on baled material. Are there any commissioners that would not support this? Commissioner Dunleavy.
Yes, because to me, that's just a one-way provision for the few facilities that are separating thermoforms. If we're going to be making a recommendation to the bottle bill, then it would be to establish commingled rates based on material shipped or sold for all commodities, specifically aluminum, glass, PET, and HDPE. So every facility would have its own rate.
Okay, so I don't know if we need to continue the discussion on this one. We do not have consensus on this one as well. Anybody else want to comment on this?
I'm prepared to withdraw the whole damn thing. But you go ahead and see if
Let's just go through
there's
this.
anything outstanding.
I want on.
Yeah, I'm with John. I'm not comfortable having these other ones without 1 through 3. I think it sends the wrong message about what we think the solution is, and we clearly don't all agree on what the solution should be.
It's a thermoform
Which is
issue.
fair. I mean, it's fair to disagree, but I would not be comfortable with the other ones being there without 1 through 3.
Okay, well, can the one that I've thrown out that I think we have general agreement is that, but I'd love to hear people's opinion on this. I still think thermoforms should not be contaminated by these other material streams in thermoforms at all, the styrofoam and the PVC. Is that something we can agree on? Okay, see one
But I think
thumbs up.
that should be taken into separate legislation, like, let's get a PVC, hey, the styrofoam, is that going to be?
About a bill, Commissioner Dell, I'm talking about a policy that's about thermoforms, and what is contaminating thermoform streams are those 2 types. So if we say our advice is those 2 are not sold anymore, I think it could help clear up the stream for whatever. It's not about a bill. This is a concept. Commissioner Sky, was that you next? Or I'm sorry, Commissioner Schneider, you have to leave 11:30. So does Commissioner Vice Chair Valle. He's got his 43rd birthday today, or anniversary. So congratulations on that.
No, quickly, I disagree with that. Taking some of those things out won't clean it up. There's PVC labels all over these things. There's no regulation of the labels. By the way, this is really hard to get off. I don't know how they're doing it. And yes, Direct Packs recycling facility is in Mexico. They don't have one in the US. You can look on their website. But no, there's other contaminants on the PET containers themselves.
But didn't we just pass a law in 343 that says that they cannot use the stickers with PVC and contamination and use the recycling symbol?
But then it still goes in the curbside bin because puts everything in the curbside bin. I see surfboards, I see TVs, and it'll still in the curbside bin. It'll get sorted in a thermoform. It'll become a toxic.
I don't understand your point. So if we're not selling 2 types that are contaminating the PET stream, and we've already addressed the labels in another bill.
We haven't addressed the labels in all of it. By listing a few things that are on the US Plastic Pact Act won't clean up all the additives in this, all the labels. There's additives. We haven't even begun to talk about those, right?
Well, 343
it won't clean them up.
Commissioner Lapis, can you help me? Because I know I'm looking at 343 right now, but I remember we addressed the contamination that was going to impact recyclability.
I think you're both right. I think Jan's point is that even though it would not be allowed to have a chasing arrow, it could still end up in the bin and it should be prohibited altogether. Is that a fair?
Including regular PET thermoforms?
With PVC labels and other things like that.
343 doesn't even get into additives. Okay, so 343 says all PET bottles are okay, even non-food grade. We didn't even get into this, right? So 343 doesn't talk.
No. So what 343 says is that there are 2 different requirements. The first cut is what CalRecycle is going to do based on their survey. And the first cut will likely show that PET bottles are eligible to be labeled recyclable as long as they meet the other requirements in the bill, including the no toxics and no violation of the APR design guidelines and a few other criteria. So it's been a common misconception the way it's been reported, but it's CalRecycle is only taking the first cut, and then you still have to meet those other requirements, including not having additives.
Yeah, and actually the words say plastic packaging is designed not to include any components, inks, additives, or labels that prevent the recyclability of the packaging according to the APR design guide. So that's why I thought we had already addressed it in that bill, the labeling part. Commissioner Sky, did you want to say something?
I did, and I'm concerned that, getting back, Commissioner Dell, to your idea of the Venn diagram, you have a really good initial policy that I think there is consensus to see it move forward to address food packaging. And at the heart of that is to say, nothing in the curbside bin should end up as food grade plastic. And if that moves forward, then we shouldn't be concerned about policies that were charged to continue to move forward to improve the recyclability of what does get placed in the curbside bin. And that's where we're trying to see this move forward. So
Sure,
I wanted
if this is about cleaning it up to make it into carpet, and even then, toxins in carpet are a thing. They're a thing too. But if this is now talking about, to be clear though, it's not to food grade, it's to non-food grade that this potentially, and even then, there's still questions.
Well, what we're
Once
trying
it goes
to do
into a curbside bin
is improve recycling of thermoforms. And I know there isn't consensus about the proposal that was before us, but I did think Chair Sanborn threw out an idea, and I wanted to build on that I do think there's certain things that are contaminants. So non-PET thermoforms, I think there is consensus, do create a contaminant to trying to recycle thermoforms. Put aside, we don't want thermoforms collected through curbside to end up as food grade, and we do need to address that, but that should be a separate policy.
Okay, so what are you suggesting here then as a policy, that there's no polypropylene, there's no PVC, there's no, what specifically, in terms of making PET thermoforms into non-food grade things, what
Right.
specifically is your policy proposal, the advice that you'd like to give? A prohibition?
I think we'll probably need to develop a new draft policy, but I think building on Chair Sanborn's idea that certain thermoforms contaminate PET thermoforms, and there are other plastics that we should just be banning outright, and PVC should be at the top of the list. And we've already talked about EPS. So I'm happy to work on that. If there's someone else, either Commissioner Dell or Sanborn, that would want to work on it, I'm happy to work on it with you.
Yeah, I worked on the US Plastics Pact, and we came up with a list of things to eliminate by 2025, which included polystyrene and PVC. So to me, those are already where the industry knows that we're going, and polypropylene is, I'm sure, up for discussion. There's a lot of people that think that should be able to try and get to 60%, but those two for me are to me no-brainers. If we could get those two alone dealt with, that would be a long way in a good directions for me. So I guess Commissioner Sky, maybe you and I can just work on revising this to be very, very narrow to that and bring it back at the next meeting.
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to add to this discussion before we wrap it up? Because where we're landing is the whole policy basically got thrown out on thermoforms, and Commissioner Sky and I are just going to come back with a very, very narrow proposal to ban the sale of thermoforms that are polystyrene or PVC. And we'll discuss polypropylene, but I don't think we'd get consensus on that one.
I think you might want to think about expanding it. So if we didn't have time to talk about the additive proposal that we talked about today, but this is what Commissioner Dunleavy and I drafted, was the idea of, okay, if you put PET bottles in a closed redemption system, they can only be collected, you're not going to get these in it, then this is a pretty clean stream. It's not 100%, but let's get the bad things out. Now, if we look at thermoforms, which, by the way, we do have options for, we are not locked into all this plastic waste from thermoforms. But if you look at PET thermoforms, and they're going to stay in curbside bins, they could go in the deposit system, one option, but if they're going to stay in curbside bins, how do you make them as clean as possible to use for downgrading things? And so you may want to consider other things as well. Besides those two things, similar to like our additives in the PET to get into food grade, what are the additives, components, things around thermoforms to ban so that the PET ones can get made most easily into carpet.
Okay, so we'll bring it back and then everybody can edit it and talk about additives and other things. But this is, I think, all we're going to be able to do on the thermoforms issue, unless somebody asks to bring it back. But I want to thank, Commissioners Davis, Dunleavy, Segura for trying really hard to find something that we could all agree on. And we can only agree on what we can agree on. So there you have it. Okay, so we're going to move on from, it's at 11:24, quick time check. We'll move on from agenda item 6 now. We've got 2 commissioners leaving in a few minutes to agenda item 7, which is the policy discussions and the July 2022 report and content. I can tell you that Commissioner Ward and I, well, I guess it's Commissioners Sky and Ward now are helping working. Thank you so much on that. Do you want to give a quick update on the report or anything?
The quickest of updates, and Commissioner Sky can chime in, but essentially we had a phone conversation and set some dates to have further discussions. We're looking to have the final report come July, similar in tone with in an introductory section, because the recent presentation from Chair Sanborn and Vice Chair Valle really underscored the value of having this be written as not only a primer on the history of resource recovery legislation in California, but also commentary on what we need to do better. And so we're going to take that same general tone. We will add a section on commenting on the success that we've had in terms of how many policies have made it into either CalRecycle policy or legislation. And I very much appreciate Commissioner Sky's contribution in that regard, but that's where we're headed.
Great. And I would encourage that we look at potentially adding that education of what the U.S. Plastics Pact did on the elimination list, because I think getting companies to agree to that list of items to be eliminated out of the packaging system should be noted, or maybe we put it as part of the food grade discussion. I just want to make sure it gets in.
I actually think that's a great suggestion, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because I think anything that sets the larger context and where things are headed, and especially gives hints about where future commission advice might be going, I think all of that is really useful and really appropriate to sort of this additional text beyond the policy. The policies are really the core of what we do, but everything else sets the context. And I think anything that gives a hint about how these things are developed, where they might be going in future, I think all of that is very relevant. For instance, the 2-person committee working on Oregon legislation and how that, if you're not coming up with a policy, I think it would be entirely appropriate to come up with 2 or 3 paragraphs comparing California's and Oregon systems and how they're developing and what's coming up. Because we share a border, we certainly share a lot of elements of our programs, and if you're looking at that and have words to add to the report, I think that would be appropriate. So towards that end, I'll summarize by saying, any of you working on any of these things that you feel like there isn't really a policy that you have in mind, but you have a few paragraphs that you think really could help set the context, and we might be working on it next year, please draft those up and let's fold them in.
I think Commissioner Toyota had written some language for the circular economy that she can send you to make sure that we discuss that in there, what it is, what it isn't, because I know there's been questions about that being hijacked, et cetera. And there's a lot of people trying to hijack terms to benefit their industry. Okay. I know that there's, it didn't come yet, but I know Commissioner Sky and Osugur are going to have some information from a couple of companies on these alternative technologies that have reached out, but we haven't got it yet. So maybe you can give us an update on that when it comes in. Are there any other of the 2-person committees that would like to report out? Anything to share? If not, that's totally fine. Okay, so, and we will disband the thermoform group. It'll be basically, well, thermoforms. we could call it thermoforms. I guess it's thermoform design, and it'll just be now Sky and Sanborn. On the
Or you
material.
could expand it for design for recycling. For example, why are there green PET bottles? The green thermoforms. There's no market for green PET bottles. This isn't toxics.
Would you rather be on that? That'd be fine. Design for recycling.
I tried it in the recycling committee last year and I proposed things, but people weren't interested. I'm happy doing the toxics and focusing there, but there needs to be a design for recycling. Green is legal, it's not toxic, but it has no value in California.
Okay, good suggestion. So we'll call it design for recycling thermoforms. And Commissioner Sky and I will take a stab at it, and then.
Heidi?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sure it should be limited to just thermoforms. I mean, you look at various other forms of material that we don't necessarily want to have these toxics either.
That was my suggestion, to not just focus on thermoforms. And I think
We already had one like that. Maybe it was just
So
we talked about
we've got one. Yeah, we proposed one on PET bottles. We didn't discuss it today. We'll bring it up the next time it's posted there. The separate is not holding toxics aside. Things that go into the curbside bin that could have value to be downcycled into carpet or pipes, if everyone thinks that's still safe, I hope. There's a design for recycling, which is the economic element, that our poor PET processors in California are getting this green and flaking it and don't have anyone to sell it, or it's going to Ecuador, and then is it getting trashed, right? And in Japan, the beverage companies have voluntarily only used clear for 20 years.
Yeah, we should absolutely make it broader, I think. Okay, we'll call it design for recycling, and we won't focus it on just thermoforms. So that'll be now myself and Commissioner Sky. Okay, so with that, unless there's anybody else who wants to speak to the two-person committees, Commissioner Donlevy has to leave as well. So we just lost 3 commissioners. We'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is our next meeting and future meetings. And then we'll do the data review with CalRecycle. So for the next meeting, I would think by then we're going to want an update on legislation that's been introduced that would be interesting to all of us. I think a lot of us do track it. I'm not sure it's worth our time to invite the CalRecycle people, and it's hard on them. They got a schedule, and when are we going to hear them and all that? If you would like, I mean, I'm pretty sure Commissioner Lapis and I are usually right on top of the legislation. We can just give you a rundown of what we're finding, and we can, everybody can chime in if you've heard of something else, and we'll start a list that we're all just kind of at least watching so we know what's going on over there. Does that work, or does somebody else have another idea? Okay, sounds good. So we'll add that, and then the food grade, we'll just keep the food grade, and we won't do thermoforms. We'll just add that design for recycling will be its own item, because I think that's another big ticket item, is the hazardous, what's food grade, and then design for recycling. And then Commissioner Ward, I think you and I really need to look at that HHW policy. Okay, but we can put that under the overall policies.
But just to get specific, did anyone raise their hand? I hope to take, in this bigger issue of toxics and food grade, we identified that, and for all of it, like the PVC packaging would come out. Would you include that in what you and Commissioner Sky are working on? This idea of no, okay, so that's in there. Okay, and then the other one, I just wanted to make sure it's on the agenda, is this deep, detailed dive specifically into additives of PET beverage bottles that Commissioner Donlevy and I have proposed, and we'd like industry input. This is to help. This is to help industry recycle.
That's what I was asking.
We didn't get to it today, right? That's fine. We all had a lot to talk about. We'll talk about it next time, but this is actually one, this is to help beverage companies get good food grade back, right? We're trying to help you tell us what should be banned, so that when it goes into the deposit system and then it gets recycled, there's not a bad additive or label or anything.
Okay, well then to make sure that has its own time, we should put that first, because you had it ready today. I got it late Monday, but we should still probably put that first.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about first next time.
Okay. Okay, so that will be Jan and Jeff. Okay, and then any other updates that people might have, and then we have, I think that's it, honestly, unless we want to talk about education component again.
I'd like to have a brief discussion once again, get a little bit more guidance on any development on a resin-focused policy. I briefly discussed that before. I said I would bring it back. I haven't done that yet, but I'm looking at it, and the short of it is there are fewer resin producers than there are manufacturers using those products. And so in terms of outreach effort, there could be a resin-focused strategy, which is yet to be developed. So I'd like a few moments to discuss that and get commissioners' input on how that might be refined.
So that's another policy, a new one to discuss.
Well, I've introduced it once and I got some feedback, and I'm going to go back and review that.
So I'm struggling with now trying to figure out what's a separate agenda item that's going to take a huge amount of time versus what should just be under the policy discussions under the little two-person groups. So
I could take it as the two-person.
Okay.
I don't want to take up a lot of the meeting.
Okay. Okay. Great. All right, then I guess, does anybody want to talk about public education at the next meeting? Do we want that on the agenda, or do you want to skip it for the next meeting? Yeah, I don't see any excitement there. Okay. So we will not have that on the next agenda, and we will, I think, move on.
I saw an email. I didn't get to read it because I'm doing agenda this week, but maybe it looks like Zoe's on. Has the outreach started under the state outreach?
Well, we're doing data review on the next. Zoe, are you on? Because we're going to do the data review and requests. And
yeah, this was on the public education, and we may want to have that on.
Hi, yes, I'm on. I have a sick kid at home, so I'm doing my best here.
Okay, sorry. I don't know how.
Did the outreach start? Did the statewide outreach start?
She's got a sick kid. I don't know if she can get to the phone. Is there anybody else from CalRecycle that would know if they've started the outreach?
Says the recycle.
Hi, sorry. I believe the outreach has not quite begun yet, but it's scheduled to begin very soon. I don't have those dates in front of me, but we'll consider that a data request and get back to you very quickly with the schedule there.
Yeah, or a discussion. That was the chair's question, was whether we wanted to talk about the. I think we do if it's getting ready to launch.
Well, like, do you want, because I think we got a pretty full meeting at the next meeting, so maybe like 10 minutes tops, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'll put 10 minutes for the education and outreach. So we'll get an update there. All right, so now we'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is the data review and requests. So there was several requests we did get, and I forwarded to all, I believe, and it's posted, the response from January 27th from CalRecycle to our request on the laws about recycling labels on plastic bags and films. And CalRecycle, it's a pretty short response, and it says, thank you for your letter on the enforcement of labeling of bags and films. CalRecycle shares the Commission's concerns about film plastic, especially its prevalence and likely resulting from the pandemic. Regarding the Commission's request that existing labeling laws be enforced and manufacturers be required to remove the word recycle and recyclable and/or the symbol from bags and films, we note that such laws include, and then they listed the laws. So they were just kind of giving us the facts, Jack. And then it says on the last page, CalRecycle remains committed to addressing film plastic and other problem materials. And we're trying to move towards a circular economy will require innovative approaches. And they look forward to further recommendations from the Commission. So they listed 3 codes, business and profession, PRC, and 2 PRC codes.
Those were actually listed in our letter to them.
Yeah.
So they agreed with our legal analysis of the laws that allegedly are not being followed. They agreed with which laws are in play.
So there you have it. Thank you again, Commissioner Dell, for putting that letter together and doing all that homework. And we did, Commissioner Dell shared with me, there is a group called Lexicon that I guess does a lot of articles and updates retailers about legal advice. And they actually mentioned the commission's letter to the AG and saying you better be on high alert, because if the commission's sending a letter to the attorney, to CalRecycle and putting everybody on alert about this labeling stuff, if you guys are selling mislabeled things, you better be on high alert that the enforcement will probably start ramping up in California. So again, great impact from these letters that they're being advised by their legal people that our commission letter has probably woken up the giant. So good work, commissioners. Are there, no, and I had asked for some feedback. What was it on? It was on the, was it thermoforms? It was something else that I had asked for data or what, that we were supposed to get feedback on today. We've gone through so much, my head is pretty full. Zoe, do you have any updates on other commission data requests? Because I know I had asked for something and I can't remember what it was right now.
Hey, this is Laura Moreno, and I can update you. So there were 3 data requests from the last meeting, one related to the budget of the statewide education campaign, and then 2 related to curbside collection programs, and we are working on those responses and we should be sending them along shortly.
Okay. Was that it? It seems like I had asked for something. We talked about it earlier in this.
Well, next month, I believe they're going to give us an update on any policy recommendations from the commission that have been implemented by CalRecycle or responses.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So Laura, is that in the queue?
Yes, that is also in the queue, and I believe Zoe was trying to interject, but I'm not sure.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I just wanted to correct for the record that a part of our recycling campaign, education outreach campaign launched today. The main thing is that our irecyclesmart.com website is live. And then we'll have a few other launches as well this week and I'll give a more robust update at the next meeting.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks. So we can all look online and see what's going on now on PR. Very good. Okay, so with that, data review is done. So we're moving on to meeting summary. Again, even if we can't come to consensus on something, I just want to say, we did the best we could, right? We gave it our best shot, and I'm still think that we all learn a lot from each other, and the public learns a lot from us, and we learn a lot from them. So it's never time wasted to me. So we still had a very productive meeting. I will be preparing with the vice chair request of Senator Eggman's office to help us with the questions about, Bagley-Keene and how we operate and, appointment power and all that stuff. We've got new 2-person committees. We'll be updating the HHW framework. So I want to thank you all again for another great meeting, and all the work that you're putting into this is paying off. So thank you, and we will see you again on the 16th of February, and we'll get the agenda done and up by Friday. Thank you again, everybody. Have a good rest of the week.